Welcome to our deep dive, everybody. Today we're going to be, diving into a film that I think really gets you thinking, a film called Equilibrium. If you're into, dystopian sci-fi, kind of mixed with some philosophy, and you like some pretty slick action, then I think you're going to like this one. We're going to be talking about emotional suppression, the power of art, rebellion, and of course, what it means to be human, all those big questions. But first, let's kind of set the scene here. So Equilibrium takes us to this post-apocalyptic world that they call Libria. And in this world, emotions are like the enemy, public enemy number one.
It's really interesting, I think, because, the whole premise of the film, it reflects so much about our anxieties today, anxieties about control and conformity.
Right.
And Libria, it really takes us to the extreme, right? I mean, they have this drug, it's mandatory, called Prosium 2, and it chemically suppresses all emotions. So you have this society that's like super calm, but there's like zero individuality.
Yeah, it's creepy how they all just go along with it, Like it's totally normal to just accept this emotional lobotomy. Everyone's convinced it's the only way to have peace, the only way to be stable. But then, the movie's smart. It shows us that, this whole suppression thing, it has a huge cost.
For sure. I mean, it's not just about like a dystopia, right? It really digs into like what makes us human, Like it asks us, if you don't have passion, if you don't have joy, if you don't even have sorrow, is it even like a life worth living at all?
That's a really good point. And this is where our main character, John Preston, comes in. He's played by Christian Bale. And he's, a high-ranking cleric, so basically he's like enforcing the system. I mean, he is completely gung-ho about wiping out anybody who's an emotional criminal. They call them sense offenders. But then he misses a dose of prosium.
And that little like slip up, it totally awakens him,
Yeah.
Suddenly it's like, boom, he's hit with all these emotions he's never felt before in his life. It's got to be like, imagine, seeing the world in like full color for the first time after only seeing, shades of gray. That's like what Preston goes through, and it totally shatters like his whole reality, everything he thought he knew about Libria.
And then we get this classic hero's journey, but it has this crazy like internal conflict layer added on top of it. Preston's not just fighting some bad guy out there. He's fighting himself, right? Yeah. He's battling all these new emotions. He's like questioning everything he's done. And he's facing the fact that everything he thought was true was like a total lie.
Totally. And that's what makes him such an interesting character. He's not just some like cardboard cutout action hero. He's, messed up, he's vulnerable, and he's, just human. And like as he's going deeper into this whole emotional suppression thing, he finds this underground resistance movement, and they're, fighting for the right to feel.
Classic. And you can't have a dystopian sci-fi movie without, some great action, right? And Equilibrium has it in like spades. It's got this really unique martial art called gun kata.
And gun kata is not just, some flashy fighting. It's got like a deeper meaning, like the way they mix like ballet moves with, super precise gunplay. It's all like a visual metaphor for Preston's internal struggle. He's trying to make sense of his training as a cleric, all that control and precision. But at the same time, he's got all this like chaotic emotion bubbling up inside him. It's a cool way to bring like those themes into the action.
And you see that in like all the visuals too. I mean, the set design is amazing. All that, stark architecture in Libria, those washed out colors,
Yeah.
and everyone's like moving so robotically. It all like reinforces this idea of a society that's given up its humanity for, order control.
Exactly. And then you contrast that with the rebels, right? They're all about art, music, literature. The things Alibria says are like dangerous because they trigger emotions. And it shows you that the movie's core message is that art is like fundamental to being human, Like it lets us connect, express ourselves, and like question the rules. If we don't have it, we're just like emotionless drones, just like the citizens of Libria.
That's, that's powerful. It makes you think about how, maybe we do the same thing in our own lives, maybe not with drugs like Prosium, but with all those, social rules
Yeah.
and expectations. We'll get into that more in the next part of our deep dive. But first, I want to talk about how the film clearly takes inspiration from like classic dystopian novels like 1984 and Fahrenheit 451.
You're totally right about those dystopian classics. I mean, Equilibrium definitely takes some cues from them, like with the whole censorship thing and the constant surveillance, all that propaganda. But it also adds this whole other layer, like a philosophical layer, drawing on like existentialism, and it really explores, what gives life meaning in a world where like individuality is totally squashed.
Hold on. back up a sec. Like,
Yeah.
how does existentialism actually show up in the movie?
Okay, so think about Preston, right? Like his whole journey, he's thrown into this like existential crisis when he starts feeling things. Like he has to face the fact that his whole life in Libria was basically meaningless, you know? Like the system made all his choices for him. And, the film is asking us, like, what's the point of existing if we don't have free will, if we can't even feel our own emotions? Like deep stuff for an action movie, right?
Yeah. It's definitely not your average, like, popcorn flick.
Yeah.
And, speaking of deep stuff, like, what about time in Libria? I mean, it feels so stagnant. Like, time is, like, a victim of the whole emotional suppression thing, too.
That's such a good point. It's like, because there are no emotional highs and lows, everything just feels flat, like this never-ending present where nothing really changes. And the people, they're just going through the motions, They live these totally predictable lives, like robots almost.
It's like they're stuck in this loop. They can't experience the normal flow of time that comes with, like, feeling happy, feeling sad, just all the messy stuff that comes with being human.
Yeah, and that frozen time thing, it really adds to the alienation and liberate, even within families, Like there's no warmth, there's no real connection. They can't relate to each other because they can't like feel or express anything. They're like ships passing in the night, close but never really touching.
Yeah, it's like a commentary on how much we need connection as humans and what happens when we just shut down our true selves. It's especially sad when you see it with Preston and his partner, Mary.
Totally. I mean, their interactions are so cold. There's no intimacy at all. It's like, suppressing emotions doesn't just mess up individuals, it messes up relationships too. Like it eats away at the whole fabric of how we connect with each other.
It's bleak,
Yeah.
know, but then there's this, like, glimmer of hope, right? The resistance fighters, they're like a symbol that you can break out of this emotional prison, that you can reclaim your humanity.
Absolutely. They represent the idea that even when everything's trying to crush you, the human spirit, it can still survive. They show us that we don't have to be defined by the system, We have the power to choose, to feel, to fight for something better, a world where emotions are seen as a strength, not a weakness.
And it's not just about, taking down the government, right? It's about something way bigger, like the right to be fully human.
Exactly. And that brings us to one of the, I think, most powerful scenes in the movie. It's when Preston finds this like secret stash of art and literature.
Oh, yeah, that scene.
Yeah.
That's when the whole message about art, like, really hits you. It's like Preston suddenly wakes up,
Yeah.
Like he's seeing the beauty in a painting, he's feeling the emotion in a poem, and it just clicks.
It's like these forbidden things. They're a total revelation for him. They unlock something inside him, He remembers what it's like to feel, to be moved, to connect with something bigger than himself. It's like art isn't just pretty, it's vital, It feeds our souls, it challenges how we see things.
And in a world where they're trying to control, like, every single part of what it means to be human, art is like this act of rebellion. It's how you say, this is who I am, and I'm not going to play by your rules.
Exactly. It's like a big middle finger to the whole idea that you can just shut down your emotions, Because humans were built to feel, to create, to connect. It doesn't matter how much the system tries to control us. That urge, it'll always find a way to express itself.
So, I mean, Equilibrium is not just some dystopian action movie, right? It's like this powerful message about how strong the human spirit is and how art can survive anything.
For sure. It's like this reminder that even when things are super dark, when you feel lost and alone, there's always hope. We can choose love over fear. We can choose connection over isolation. And we can embrace all those emotions, the good and the bad, that make life worth living.
It's been pretty intense so far, this discussion. But before we jump into, how the movie wraps up in its final message, I want to turn it over to you, our listeners. What are you guys thinking about all this? Like, what parts of the film really got to you? And, what questions does it make you ask about your own life, about the world we live in? Okay, so we're back, and, we've been talking about this dystopian world in equilibrium, all those, complex ideas, and the philosophy behind it all. So now let's talk about how it ends and the message it leaves us with.
Yeah, so the last part of Equilibrium, it's not just like a big action scene, It's like It all comes together. Everything we've been talking about, the fight for freedom, for being yourself, for having the right to actually feel things.
And it all comes down to John Preston, right? He's our guy. And he goes from being this, like, emotionless robot, enforcing all the rules, to this, like, passionate rebel fighting for the very things he used to try to destroy.
Classic hero stuff, but with a twist, right? It's not just about how good he is at fighting, it's about like how he grows emotionally. He learns to embrace all his feelings, and that's what actually gives him the strength to like face Father, the leader of Libria.
Yeah, and that final fight, it's like way more than just a shootout. The way Preston uses Gunkata in that scene, it's like super symbolic.
Right. Remember we were saying how Gun Kata is like a visual representation of his inner struggle? Well, in the climax, it's like his movements are so fluid, like almost like dancing, you know? He's found that balance, that equilibrium between control and freedom, logic and emotion, like the title of the movie.
Which is beautiful to watch.
Yeah.
And it really drives home the message about finding that balance. It's not about getting rid of your feelings or letting them like take over. It's about like figuring out how to integrate them into your life.
Exactly. And that's what Preston does. He wins, he beats Father, and not just because he's a good fighter, but because he uses his skills, his strategy, and all that emotional depth he's gained.
Powerful stuff. It's like the movie is saying, hey, don't be afraid of your emotions, even the hard ones. They're not weaknesses. They're what make us human, what give our lives meaning.
And then the ending, Libria is free from this, like, tyrannical rule, but it's not all sunshine and roses, you know what I mean?
Yeah, like it's not a simple happy ending.
Right. The movie knows that it's tough to rebuild a society where everyone's been taught to be afraid of their feelings. It makes you wonder, how do you even start to bring back emotions into a world that's all about control? And I think that's what makes Equilibrium so relevant today. I mean, we're living in a world that's obsessed with being efficient, being productive, but what about our emotional well-being?
It's true. It makes you think, are we like suppressing our own emotions without even realizing it? Are we just conforming to all these expectations that keep us from like truly expressing ourselves?
Totally. Equilibrium is like a warning, It's saying, hey, don't give up your individuality. Don't sacrifice your emotions for some fake sense of security or just to fit in, It's telling us to question the system, embrace our feelings, and fight for a world where we can connect and be ourselves.
So I guess that's it, our deep dive into Equilibrium. It's been, I don't know about you, but it's definitely given me a lot to think about.
Me too. It's the kind of movie that stays with you, makes you look at your own life, at the world with like fresh eyes.
So to all you sci-fi fans out there, if you haven't seen Equilibrium, you got to check it out. It's a visual masterpiece, and it makes you think, makes you want to debate, and maybe even, makes you feel a little bit more.
Yeah, and let us know what you think, what parts really stuck with you, what questions did it raise? Join the conversation. And until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep feeling.